Welcome to Stay Tuned's Garage. My name is Alex, and today I'm gonna be replacing the steering rack in my 1996 Honda Accord. Real quick, I wanted to say why I'm replacing the steering rack. So, when I was first getting into working on my car, I actually replaced it. I had a bad rack, and I replaced it with a new one, rebuilt from some company, I forget where, and it was a pretty hard thing to do for like one of my first major things to do in a car, and I messed it up. I actually, when I tightened one of the fittings for it's actually the high pressure hose to the rack from the steering pump, I cross-threaded it, and I haven't had power steering since because it just leaks out and goes everywhere. So I just don't throw fluid in it, and I disconnected the steering pump, so that's still good. It's just has no belt to it. It just kind of hangs there, and I just haven't had power steering since that, about 3 years ago. I finally went ahead and I bought another steering rack. Now, I didn't have to buy another steering rack. I could have easily pulled the one I have out, tapped it, or maybe it's the fitting that got cross-threaded, maybe both of them. So I have a new line and I have a new steering pump. The reason I did that is to prevent time down on my car, and they were pretty cheap. Like total for everything was like 60 bucks at the junkyard, so I don't mind paying that at all. And I'm gonna put new inner tie rods and outer tie rods on the new steering rack. So everything should be perfect when I'm done, hopefully, fingers crossed. So I'm gonna go ahead and start getting the old rack out, and so we could get the new one in. Alright, first thing I'm gonna do is actually come under the driver seat, get my floor mats out. See all that dirt that just jumped up? Yeah, that's how not clean this car is. It's the daily, we get our use out of her. And then you want to go under here. Alright, so down here, as you can see, there's that one plastic clip right in the middle of the screen. There's one down there kind of under the carpet, and there are two over here. The one in the top left, don't worry about. The one right in the middle of the screen right now is the one you have to get off. And once you take those off, you can take this whole plastic covering off of the steering shaft. There's a little metal clip that runs through it right in the middle of the screen right there. It's kind of hard for you to see, but you can kind of just pull that back and it'll come undone. Now with the steering shaft exposed, we have two 10mm nuts that we have to loosen. One of them is on this, let me see, it's on this upper collar. As you can see, this is the back side of the nut, and the head of it is over here. So we are gonna have to turn the steering wheel to be able to access this one. And the other one is down there, that is the head. So that one we should be able to access in this position. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen that one, and then I'm gonna turn the steering wheel and loosen this one. And actually, if I remember correctly, you do have to take them completely out. I don't remember 100%, but I will go ahead and do it, and I will let you guys know after I do it. Alright, so you only have to completely remove the bottom nut for the bottom collar, and then the higher collar, you just have to loosen it. And then what you want to do is actually turn your steering wheel all the way to the left. So you can see my wheels all the way turned to the left. And this will make sense later when we're removing the steering rack. Alright, and now when you remove the steering rack should come right off of that collar and come out just fine. Alright, now I'm going to move to the tie rods of the car. These are the outer tie rods. So what I'm going to do first is remove this cotter pin right here. I'm just gonna get some like needle nose pliers, straighten these back ones out and pull it out this way. Then I'm gonna loosen this nut. I think it's either a 15 or a 17, I forget. But usually most of it's gonna be a 17 actually. Most of this suspension stuff is usually 17s on this Honda. So I'm going to take this castle nut off, turn it over on this, and just get it flush with the top of this stud right here. And then I'm gonna hammer it down to get the tie rod out of its place. And then I'm just gonna leave it there. And then I'm gonna loosen the lock nut on the tie rod over here, so that later on, so that I can remove this whole outer tie rod to make the removal of the rack easier. And I'm actually probably gonna have to even out the steering wheel again, but once you remove the steering rack, you want it to be all the way left. All right, I got both sides out now, and what I'm going to do is to somewhat have my car aligned when I put the new rack in and I put the new tie rods in and all that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to count how many turns it takes to get this tie rod off. So I will start in its neutral position like that, and then I will start turning it. That's 1 turn, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 18, 19. So it was like 19 and a little bit. So now when I put the new tie rod on the new rack, I'll try and do 19 turns for that. And it won't be perfect. It'll never be perfect, no matter how close you get it. You should always get a new alignment after you, change any suspension, really. All right, so this is probably gonna be one of the most uncomfortable and hardest things to do in this whole job. So there are 2 lines that go to the steering rack, the high pressure and the low pressure, that both go, well, one comes up here to the power steering pump, and one will go down to the cooler, and then that will go to the reservoir, then go up to the pump. Or it does something like that. It might go to the reservoir, and then I don't know exactly where the low pressure one goes, but I know the high pressure one is this one right here. I have my replacement over there, and they are buried in the engine bay. So there is the outlet for both of them. They are both focused on there. One is right under a hose right now, so you can't see it too well, but that's one of them right there, right in the middle of your screen. And you have to get to them from up here because you can't get to them from under the car. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start removing things that I can move. So like these 2 vacuum lines here, I'm gonna pop them off right here and just move them to the side. This harness right here is held on by 110 mil bolt. I'm gonna remove that, and then remove the bolt up there and just pull that this way. Last time I did this, I actually had to remove the upper part of the intake right here. So I might have to do that. Not remove it completely, but lift it and move it over a couple inches just so I have more room for my arms. Best bet is you're probably going to get scratched up in your forearms and such if you don't wear like a long sleeve. So yeah, be wary of that. And when you work with these fittings, this one's a 14, you want to use a flared wrench that you go through the line and then you get on it like that. If you try and use a normal wrench, you have a very, very high chance of stripping these. So don't want that. That would suck. And yeah, so I'm gonna go get started and I'll show you guys when I'm done. All right, so as you can see in there, both of the fittings are out of the steering rack. It sucked to do. So when you're in there, let's say we're doing this one right here. So you'll have to go in and loosen it, right? And then you'll have to turn it around, go in, loosen it just a tiny bit more, just so you can turn it around again and get a full turn on it. The good thing is normally once you get them loose enough, you can just do it by hand. One of mine, the cross-threaded one, was not that easy. I had to just keep turning and turning and turning, but I got it in, or I got it out, which is what I needed, and it's just a pain. So I loosened this harness, which I was mentioning earlier that I was gonna do. I didn't end up removing these. I just kind of moved them to the side. What else did I do? Oh, and then as you can see, the upper intake right here is not where it's supposed to be. There's 3 bolts that hold it on and 2 nuts. The nuts are on this one and that one. There's 1, 2, and 3 bolts. You just take all those off and you can just pop it right up. And that just gives me enough clearance to get my hand in here and all the way down there. And even then, it's a really tight fit. And there is one fuel line, which you will see right, that fuel line right there that I'm focused on will be your worst nightmare. And it will, that little clamp will dig into you and it will suck and it will always be in the way, but it is doable with it in. You can remove it, but that's up to you. You'll probably dump fuel everywhere. Or maybe not, it's the return from the, or maybe not, I'm not sure, but I just didn't want to mess with it. And when you do this, you will dump a bunch of power steering fluid. My car doesn't have any in it, so there's nothing to leak, but yours probably will, so be wary of that and have a drip pan ready. All right, now once down here, there are only 6 bolts holding in the steering rack. There's 1 right here, 2, 3, and 4. And then there are 2 more. There are 2 more right there on that little bracket. So once you remove all 6 of those, the steering rack will be pretty much loose, and they are 14mm bolts. One thing I forgot to mention is we have to unbolt this flex pipe here. We don't have to remove it completely, but we at least need to take it out of this flange right here. So go ahead and do that. These should be 12mm bolts. Oh no, these are 14s. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and loosen all of these and I will see you back when I'm done with that. All right, so I got, I have it most of the way out now. And remember when I said to turn it all the way to the left? Yeah, so when you turn it all the way to the left, what it does is the tie rods on the left side get super short. What you want is for the left side, the left tie rod, to be as small as possible, so that when you drop the steering rack, you can move it to the right and it'll clear this little bracket right here. And once it clears this bracket, then you can pull it towards this way so that this tie rod over here can go out that way. Or you can just pull the other tie rod so that this one shortens, and then you can get this one under its bracket, because those brackets are welded in and you can't remove them. They're part of the subframe, which is kind of a crappy design. They should be removable. But once you do that, you can finagle the steering rack in between the exhaust. Yeah, I only removed the front side of the of the exhaust. For the steering rack, simply put, get that side short, drop that side, and then lengthen that side so you can drop this side, and you just kind of have to pull it that way, and you should be able to drop it out of there. All right, and here is the old steering rack out from the car. And so now I'm gonna show you the new steering rack, and I am actually gonna change the inner tie rods in it. I actually recorded that before recording this, and I'm pretty sure I referred to the inner tie rods as outer tie rods in that clip. So correcting myself right now, I'm changing the inner tie rods in the clip, not outer tie rods. So yeah, I will see you once I'm done with that. Alright, so here we have the donor rack, and the first thing we're gonna have to do with this, which I've already done, is actually remove the boot. It's pretty simple to do that. So first thing you're gonna have to do to take it off is take off this little metal band that clamps around it right here in the rubber, and then it goes around this. In order to do that, so the metal band is assembled like it is here. And all you have to do is undo the crimps right here, and then you'll be able to slide it out from the other crimp, and then it'll come apart just like that. And then on this side of the boot, it'll have like a wire spring looking thing. Looks like this. And all you have to do is on one of the ends, pick at it with like a flathead screwdriver and start undoing it and uncoil it, take it off. And then after that, you should be able to pop this out. And all you have to do is take this nut off. Take it all the way off, or else there will be no room to be able to take the boot off. But then after that, you can pop this out of its place, and you can pop this side out of its place here just by overcoming the little lip here. And once you take that rubber boot off, you will have what I have here, which is the exposed outer tie rod. And right here it has a flat washer that has been bent on the sides to hold in the outer tie rod. So what you have to do is you have to unbend this washer so that it's off of the outer tie rod, and it has two bends. It has one on this side and one on the other side. You can see right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get behind that with a punch that is somewhat flat. I'm gonna get under that and then just bend it backwards, and then I'm gonna do that on both sides, and then I'll show you that when I'm done. Alright, so I just used this little pick right here and this like sort of hammer, and I got it somewhat close to being flat, but it's not perfect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to get some vice grips in here, and I'm going to squeeze it so that it's as flat as I can get it. Alright, so now that that little washer is flush with this bigger washer behind it, now you can see, since there are two flat sides on that little piece of the outer tie rod, you can get a 17mm wrench in there perfectly. Then there are two flat sides to the actual steering rack, and I don't know exactly what size that is. The biggest size I have is 3/4, and it's bigger than that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some vice grips and hold it that way. There we go. Okay, so here's the old outer tie rod and here's the new one. This is a Moog problem solver. Really good stuff. I will link them down in the description if you want to use the same stuff I'm using. I'm actually using them for the outer tie rods and the inner tie rods. So it comes with a brand new washer here to replace this one. This one's junk. This is the big washer that was behind it, and you want this rubber seal to go to face inside towards the rack. And yeah, so these tie rods weren't actually too far gone. They're not too bad. They're smooth. They're a little loose, but they're still smooth. I wouldn't replace these normally. I'm just replacing them because, I mean, I have new stuff and just to be sure, you know? Junkyard tie rods. Alright, so for reassembly, you're going to want to put this washer with the concave part towards the tie rod and these two things sticking out towards the steering rack. And you're going to want the flat side towards your tie rod and the rubber part towards the steering rack. You kind of have to put the washers on first and then screw it all in and go from there. Alright, so here we go. I got it all tight now, and I mean, you just tighten it the same way you loosened it. You actually don't really need to grab it with the vice grips on this one. You can kind of just tighten it. You don't have to go super duper tight, just tight enough is fine. The lock washer will lock it in so it doesn't come loose. And now you will bend down the tabs, or bend down that lock washer. I'm gonna use this here chisel. I like it because it has a big surface area to get a lot of the washer down there. So just hit it a couple times, get it flat on the flat side on both sides. Get it as flush as I can to it, and then we'll be good to go. Alright, so now that I got the new outer tie rod in, now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go put the boot back on. And since we did break those metal bands and that little metal spring type thing that was on here, what I'm gonna do is just use a couple of zip ties. Zip ties could eventually fail if they get old and brittle, and if that is the case, then you can just put another zip tie on. It shouldn't be that big of a deal. But if you can get metal zip ties or something like that, if it makes you feel better, go ahead and use them. I feel fine with just putting normal zip ties on, so that's what I'm gonna do. And you just kind of slide it all back on. You gotta take the nut off first so that it fits through. Put the new one on, or put the boot on. Connect this little breather hose to that little nipple right there. Put that in behind its seating spot. That one goes right in this little hole right here, and you should be all set to go. Just like that, we are ready to go back in the car. Alright, so it is about time to throw the new steering rack in. One thing I wanted to say is that right now when your steering wheel is turned, when your steering wheel is completely disconnected, like the steering shaft is disconnected from the steering rack, it will turn no problem. You don't want to turn it. My steering wheel doesn't have it, but yours should have a clock spring in it that has a wire that is just coiled a bunch of times. And if you spin it too much, it will rip that coil and everything on your steering wheel will stop working, including your airbag. Very unsafe, very bad, don't want to do that. Just keep the steering wheel straight while you're not attached to anything. Alright, I got the steering rack back in place and I'm trying to get the fittings on it right now. One thing I would say is get them tight with your hand. Screw them in with your hand. If they feel tight, back up and try again, because you don't want to cross thread these. Trust me, you really don't. And yeah, once you get them as tight as you can with your hand, just get in there with the wrench and tighten them up the rest of the way and you should be good. Alright, I got everything put back together in the engine bay. New line, everything's all set up. I'm actually gonna put the what is it called? The belt back on it. It hasn't had, as you can see, it's like rusty. It hasn't had it for so long. And I'm gonna have to put new fluid in the reservoir. You will probably have to do this as well, since you will lose a lot of fluid when you take your steering rack out. And one thing you're gonna have to do before you turn the car on is just kind of bleed it. Once you get everything put back together and you put fluid in here, just turn your steering wheel left and right for a while to get any air out of the system and to bleed it. And then that way no air goes into the pump and possibly damages it. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and keep going. All I need to do now is put that belt back on, put some fluid in here, and hook up the steering shaft through the inside, and I should be good to go. Alright, steering shaft is all put together. Now we gotta do the steering fluid. This is genuine Honda steering fluid. I'll leave a link to it in the description if you would like to use it. And I got my new outer tie rods from Moog. I'll link those in the description as well. Alright, I just ran it for the first time. We got the belt back on, we got the fluid in, we got the tie rods in. Everything is back together. I turned the steering wheel both ways a bunch of times and there are no leaks whatsoever, so my problem is finally fixed after 3 years. It only took like 2 3/4 of the bottles and my system was completely empty. And they're 12 fluid ounce bottles each, so I would say about 30 fluid ounces it took, maybe less than that, maybe like 28 or so. She is back on the floor and I am absolutely exhausted. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed or learned or whatever it was. I mean, I hope you somethinged. Like I said, I'm gonna have the link to the parts I used in the description, the outer tie rods, inner tie rods, and the power steering fluid. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you'd like. And I will see you guys next time. Stay tuned.